Hello and welcome to this video on fish oil and the purported health benefits. For this video, we'll not be discriminating between fish oil and krill oil, as for the most part, the primary active ingredient of concern are the same omega fatty acids. We will focus on the administration of fish oils to adults, rather than children, as developmental research is notoriously fraught with ethics considerations and a variety of issues with replication. There are many claims about the health benefits of fish oils. These are largely based on the docosahexaenoic acid, or DHA, eicosapentaenoic acid, EPA, or broadly the omega fatty acids within the oil. For the most part, these cannot be synthesized by the human body, but can be generated by some microbes within the GI tract. The larger acids, however, cannot be generated by the tract and absorbed into the body. There are claims about fish oil helping with inflammation, heart disease, blood pressure, cholesterol, arthritis, and neurological degeneration. To get these results, it is generally accepted that people take between 250 and 500 milligrams a day of combined supplemental EPA and DHA. The tablets, pills, and liquids as sold may not contain these values exactly, with approximately 300 milligrams of DHA and EPA in 1000 milligrams of fish oil, or approximately 30% bioavailability. This can vary drastically between manufacturers. The total daily DHA and EPA recommended for women is 1100 milligrams and 1600 milligrams for men a day. No more than 3000 milligrams a day should be consumed by either sex. This again is an issue of bioavailability. Fish oil itself can have a number of interactions. It can interfere with anticoagulant and antiplatelet drugs, and more importantly, some herbs and supplements that have similar effects. Fish oil supplements might cause an increased risk of bleeding as a consequence. There's also concerns about blood pressure. Some blood pressure drugs can have an increased effect if you take the fish oil. There's also issues with vitamin E. Vitamin E, being an oil, can reduce some vitamin E levels if consumed at the same time. Finally, there is some concern about mercury in fish oil. For the most part, well-regulated markets do not have to be concerned about mercury levels, as reputable brands are regularly tested and found to be at safe levels well below what they would have an effect on the human body. Now we know the benefits and downsides of fish oil, let's look at the evidence. Fish oils contain a large amount but very variable level of the omega-3 long fatty acids. These are an unsaturated fatty acid. The two we've mentioned, EPA and DHA, are generally what's there. There's also a third, DPA or docosahexaenoic acid, which is related to DHA. From a nutritional point of view, you can think of EPA and DHA as more or less exactly the same thing. You will generally find that there's about twice as much EPA than DHA in fish oil. Despite this, that difference in quantity of each is largely irrelevant. Both EPA and DHA have the same effect, particularly when we talk about cardiovascular disease. There are variations in response to DHA, and that supplementation might be accounted for by the variances in the base level of DHA. The larger the difference from what is called the basal level, or the pre-study level, of the various omega fatty acids, and the threshold at which a change is observed, will vary drastically based on the basal level. This means overall that it's not necessarily a product of the supplement itself, but general dietary supplementation and dietary modification. As the richest sources of DHA and EPA are fish, and broadly speaking, lower socioeconomic status of some people mean they may not have access to fish, this means they may have a basal deprivation of DHA and EPA, which is then mitigated by providing this in a supplement. Research that considers this, in context of everything else, is not abundant, but there is some, and it appears to support this underlying theory. DHA is known to play a significant role in the myocardial cells, specifically the membranes of these cells. Where the brain isn't as affected by the omega fatty acids, the heart does seem to be, and the reports are reasonably consistent that the more DHA there is, the less damage from chronic stress, but also a reduction in heart rate. In the brain, it's a little more diverse in outcomes, and it has some effect, or at least appears to have some effect, on neurodegenerative diseases. These are things like your Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and so on. Essentially, the aging brain argument that's often used in marketing. Despite having a clear effect in some cases, the overall results, if we're not talking about neurodegenerative diseases, is far more mixed. And this is a problem. The results aren't consistent. Overall, DHA appears to have no significant effect on cognitive function. This again goes back to the earlier theory of what is the basal level. Others have demonstrated at least some benefit in memory. In those studies looking at memory, there was some benefit to be gained from having a large amount of DHA versus EPA, and this was also reflected in verbal fluency testing. Meta-analyses of many studies, 15 in fact, found that it's a combined effect of EPA and DHA, not just the DHA, and so individual studies have proven to be somewhat inconsistent and difficult, with combined analyses of all studies demonstrating that the effect of both EPA and DHA is heterogeneous, or consistent among both types of oil. Like with the brain, both EPA and DHA have some effect on the inflammatory system, that is, immune responses. The differences in their biological function aren't clear though, and that's a problem. It's not clear how EPA and DHA, which appear to have different functionality to them, can have that effect on inflammation. They are, in most experiments that have been conducted, anti-inflammatory. That would, in theory, help later on with things like rheumatoid arthritis, which is an immunological process, allergies, and other diseases. Looking at fish oils on a larger scale and simply the effect that they have on cardiovascular disease and particularly death from cardiovascular disease, there appears to be little or no difference to the all-cause mortality. That is, if you are going to die from something heart disease related and you take fish oil, you are no better off than someone who isn't. There appears to be at least some slight theoretical reduction, but nothing that's statistically significant. And when you're talking about studies that have thousands and thousands of participants, you can be fairly confident that this is the case. Coronary heart disease events, similarly, don't appear to have any real difference. Some of these studies that were used in the meta-analyses found a reduction from 4.8% to 4.7%, which is well within a margin of error. Several very low-quality studies have looked at the effects it has on arrhythmias, which it did appear to demonstrate some benefit from, but again, the issues regard quality of the studies. Finally, the effect on stroke hasn't been elucidated by any studies at all. We mentioned early on that we weren't going to look in detail about krill oil and fish oil differences, primarily because the lipid-modifying effects of these two are the same, and the primary active ingredient, those omega fatty acids, are the same. The only noteworthy point for this is that the reduction in triglycerides, which are generally considered a bad form of fat, are entirely dose-dependent on the omega fatty acids consumed. Overall, the effect of fish oil does not appear to be as significant as claimed by some of the mainstream broadcasters and marketing. Much of the observed event and effects seem to be related to what the initial or basal dose of the person consuming it is. That is, if you already have a relatively healthy lifestyle and good diet, the benefits for you as an individual when taking fish oil are significantly reduced compared to someone who doesn't have that kind of base healthy lifestyle. This won't suddenly improve your longevity, cognitive function, or anything else. There is some narrow scope for benefits in certain ways, but they seem to be niche effects and need to be better evidenced. Thank you for watching this video. If you found it interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please post any comments, questions, or suggestions that you have below.